One fine morning, your distant Aunt Carol came to your family home in an almost frantic state of excitement. Carol had always been a bit eccentric, totally harmless of course, but what you'd describe as being on the more zealous side of religious. Predictably, she wanted to ask you and your family to come to church with her. Seeing as you don't see Aunt Carol often, you and your family decide that there's no harm in indulging her. You're not an atheist family by any means. In fact, you were all raised Catholic, but it felt like it'd been forever since you last went to church. Aunt Carol wanted to show you and your family the special celebrations that went on at her church. You remember her practically grabbing you by the wrist and dragging you to the building, her eyes filled with a crazed enthusiasm. That's when you saw something incredibly strange. There were shadows moving behind the elaborate stained glass windows. Thousands of tiny shadows darting around, and this low humming noise you faintly recognized. What was that noise? It was the cry of cicadas, but this was only early spring. What were cicadas doing awake at this time of year? You didn't get much time to ponder this question. In the next few seconds, you and the entire church were surrounded by heavy-duty tactical vehicles. What appeared to be a large and heavily armed SWAT team poured out of the vehicles. Unbeknownst to you, these were a mobile task force sent in by the SCP Foundation, specifically MTF-Y99, also known as the Altar Boys, a specially trained group of Foundation agents used for anomalies of a religious nature. You, your aunt, and the rest of your family are rounded up to be debriefed and given amnestics. One of the last memories they took from you was the sight of Foundation agents dragging bloody bodies out of the church. As the doors opened, thousands of cicadas streamed out and disappeared into the skies. But these weren't like any kind of cicada you'd ever seen. They were beautiful. Their rainbow-colored wings reminded you of ornate stained glass. Who could have guessed that these pretty little bugs are tied to an entity very likely to bring about an XK-class end-of-the-world scenario someday in the future? The bugs, the bodies in the church, and even your aunt's incredibly strange behavior all fall underneath the umbrella of a Keter-class anomaly known as SCP-3004. But to truly understand this anomaly that was once thought to be destroyed, and the implications of it still living today, we need to go back 600 years to Ireland in the 15th century. This era was believed to be the origin of a Gaelic religious movement known as Cétlaidí, or the Singers in English, a splinter sect of Druidism. But this was no fringe cult. The Singers were a mainstream religion in the British Isles for several hundred years. Its members included people of all social classes, from lowly peasants to powerful and respected figures. They mingled heavily with Christians, mostly Irish Catholics, and at some point in history came close to overtaking Christianity as the dominant religion in Ireland. So, who were these people, if they're supposedly such a large part of recent history in the area? Like most Druids, their relationship with nature was a key part of their belief system. In particular, they prized an extinct species of cicada known as Cicada luculenta, or the stained glass cicada in English. The life cycle of birth and resurrection that the cicadas underwent fascinated the Singers, and they performed a number of holy rituals around it. One recorded ritual was the celebration of children entering adulthood that was marked by them first losing their baby teeth. But the rituals of the Singers accidentally opened some kind of door to a being from a different plane of reality, dubbed SCP-3004-1 by the Foundation. This being is an immensely powerful thought form that the Foundation believes to be a pittisphage, or faith eater. It appears to have been attracted to our universe by the rituals of the Singers, and so took a form relevant to their beliefs, namely a huge cicada, in order to feed on their faith. If things had stopped there, then this would be an almost innocent symbiotic relationship. But the interactions between SCP-3004-1 and our world led to dangerous consequences due to its powerful reality warping abilities. For example, during some rituals, huge numbers of stained glass cicadas would burst from the mouths of those participating, often causing them to choke to death. Other times, 3004-1 would manifest physically in the sky above its new worshippers, causing painful boils on whoever witnessed it, and occasionally symptoms akin to radiation sickness. It appeared that 3004-1 was growing more powerful over time, and its rise to power was intrinsically linked to the rituals of the Singers and the existence of the stained glass cicadas. two groups that predated the Foundation, the Vatican's Congregation for Otherworldly Acts, and the English government's Royal Society for the Imprisonment of Abnormality, essentially performed an all-out religious genocide on the singers. No meaningful trace of the religion was left when they were done, aside from their own records. While they were at it, they also exterminated all the stained glass cicadas, leading to a complete stop of all SCP-3004 activity. It seemed like, despite the great human and ecological cost, the anomaly had been neutralized. A few centuries later, though, a series of strange cicada-related anomalous events started to occur across the United States. A strange man, seemingly made almost entirely from cicada chitin, would appear at christenings, weddings, and funerals. Each time his presence would cause the people in attendance to do and experience horrific things, and lead to legacies of hardship and death that would linger for decades. This became known as SCP-2852, or Cousin Johnny, and it should have been the first clue that the nightmare of SCP-3004 was resurfacing. But since 3004 was already archived as neutralized, nobody made the connection. Sometime later, SCP-2852 incidents ceased, and around that exact time, SCP-3004 instances started anew. It manifested in the form of strange, anomalous activities taking place at Christian church services, specifically those from Roman Catholic, Eastern Catholic, Anglican, and Episcopalian communities. The only clues to outsiders would be an increase in reported church attendance and an increase in deaths from natural causes within the community. These two stats were how the Foundation first noticed something was amiss. Just as it had done with the singers centuries before, SCP-3004-1 had latched onto the beliefs and rituals of Christians and was using this new connection to harvest more faith for sustenance. The results were twofold. First, religious fervor and excitement to attend church services saw a huge increase. Secondly, the actual content of these services took a hard turn for the horrific. Much like Cousin Johnny infiltrations, this really isn't for the faint of heart by any definition. For example, young people with Christ-like stigmata wounds being bitten to death by priests, children removing the teeth of priests before they all start vomiting huge numbers of stained glass cicadas. There were extremely unpleasant rituals involving castration, and even a pregnant woman giving birth to even more swarms of stained glass cicadas. We could go on, but you probably get the idea. Rituals inspired by SCP-3004-1 are horrific, and all seem to involve the same extinct breed of stained glass cicadas worshipped by the singers before their annihilation. But how can these insects, which have been dubbed SCP-3004-2, be here in the present if the Foundation Forerunners made them extinct so many centuries ago? The answer is simple, but strange. While they have all the hallmarks of being alive, the stained glass cicadas present during modern iterations of SCP-3004 events aren't actually real. Genetic tests have shown that they're actually made from a mix of wood and real stained glass. These insects fly away from the scene after the rituals are completed, traveling around 600 miles from the site before disappearing completely. The Foundation was growing concerned about the nature of SCP-3004, especially given that instances were becoming more frequent and harder to contain. Foundation scientists determined that the creature known as 3004-1 likely existed within a layer of reality just above our own, and if it ever managed to breach our reality, the world level of violence and chaos it could cause would likely lead to an XK-class end-of-the-world scenario. Drastic actions would once again be needed to prevent this, so they devised an emergency containment procedure that would only be used as a last resort. The procedure, known as Protocol Damantio ad Bestias, would use a mixture of mass amnestic treatment and thaumial objects to completely erase Christianity from not only the modern world, but all of history, in hopes of cutting off SCP-3004-1's food supply to kill the entity, or at least prevent it from entering our world. The plan would center on placing a powerful Roman Catholic reality warper, who volunteered for the job of course, into an anomalous group of machines known as the Lions. By submitting the reality warper to a lifetime of suffering and essentially erasing him from existence, so too will it erase the world's full knowledge of Christianity and hopefully save the world. This man will become the last martyr, dying for all of humanity. He will become the last saint, St. Jude the Damned, bulwark against darkness. You might ask, are you sure that's necessary? There's so much we don't know about 3004-1. Do we know for a fact that it's dangerous? Enter Agent Timothy Lutterman, a member of Mobile Task Force Sigma-25, also known as Ghostbusters. Lutterman was part of a Foundation project known as Site C Lux, using an astral projection technology that would free his consciousness from his body and allow it to travel freely between metaphysical planes. In plain English, they could use Lutterman's floating mind as a kind of spy and insert it into 3004-1's dimension. They achieved this by capturing one of 3004-1's false stained glass cicadas and releasing it again, allowing Lutterman's mind to follow it home to its master. However, what we thought would be a simple intel gathering mission turned into a complete nightmare. Lutterman found that 3004-1's dimension was entirely void, aside from the entity itself and the millions of buzzing stained glass cicadas. The entity was so huge and so complex that it physically hurt to look at. Lutterman observed that its form kept shifting, from a giant cicada to an old man to a cicada nailed to a wooden cross to an infinite mess of wood and stained glass. But even more terrifying than its physical appearance were the contents of its mind. 3004-1 forced itself into Agent Lutterman's brain, and in that moment, he finally understood it. The entity, which had no concept of metaphors, allegory, or the divide between fact and fiction, truly believed that it was the Abrahamic God depicted in the Bible, and that all Christians are lovingly worshipping it. In its rituals, it was imposing some of the bloodiest parts of the Bible onto its flock, believing that's what they wanted. All the while it fed on their faith, growing bigger and more powerful. Lutterman found that just being there with the creature was hurting his soul. If it wasn't a god yet, he believed it had the power to become one in time, and he advised the Foundation shouldn't send anyone else to its dimension. It was too great a risk to all life on Earth. Perhaps to prevent the horrible fate of all of us being destroyed by 3004-1, erasing Christianity would be a worthy sacrifice. That is, if it actually works. After all, they thought destroying the Singers would neutralize 3004 once and for all. And yet, here it is again. For all we know, we may just be prolonging the inevitable. Now go check out SCP-001, the Children Ouroboros Cycle, and SCP-5000-Y, the full compilation for more freaky anomalies with world-shattering implications.